I didn't plan on seeing Chase Morgan again. Not after what happened between us back in college. But there he was, standing in front of me in that glass office tower in Manhattan, looking like someone who hadn't just buried his wife 6 months. Earlier, "I need a favor," he said. Not the kind of favor you ask someone over coffee. Chase was always intense, but this was something else. He wanted me to have his child. No strings, no expectations. Just help him create a future he'd lost when his wife passed, and in return he'd clear every dollar of debt my parents were drowning in. Give my little sister a chance to go to college, save our family's house from foreclosure. He said, "It's just a medical procedure, nothing personal. A transaction." I told myself the same thing. I signed the papers, met the doctor, went through all the appointments like I was on autopilot. And when the test came back positive, he smiled. For the first time in months. That smile shouldn't have meant anything to me. But it did. We never talked about names. Never talked about me holding the baby. The plan was simple. After delivery, I'd walk away. Debt-free. Emotionally untouched. I thought I was just renting. My body. Not my heart. But hearts don't follow contracts. They grow quietly, like roots under a sidewalk. And sometimes, they crack you open when you least expect it, especially when the day finally comes. And the babies arrive. That's when everything changed, because the deal might have been signed. But the way Chase looked at me in that hospital room, that told me he never planned on keeping his promise. And what he said next? It broke something I didn't even know was still whole. They came into the world faster than anyone expected. 2 perfect boys with tiny fists and lungs that filled the whole room. The nurses called them strong. I just stared, quiet, shaking, watching the way their little mouths opened like they were already trying to say something. I didn't think I'd cry, but when the nurse placed them on my chest, something I didn't prepare for happened. They didn't just feel like babies. They felt like mine. They had Chase's eyes, my nose. One of them had a dimple when he yawned. I touched their fingers, so small like matchsticks. I whispered, "I'm your mom." Just once. Just for me. The nurse asked, "Do you want to hold them a bit longer?" I nodded. My voice was stuck somewhere behind my ribs. For that moment, I forgot the contract. I forgot the money. I forgot that I had promised to disappear. And maybe that was my first mistake. Chase didn't come until hours later. His expression was blank. Not tired, not excited, just blank. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I needed anything. He walked straight to the window, looked out and said, "They'll be discharged tomorrow. You can leave tonight." I asked, "Can I say goodbye?" He didn't turn around. 5 minutes, he said. "Then it's over. Your job is done." That's when it hit me. I wasn't invited to be part of their lives. I was just a vessel, a placeholder for someone he lost. Someone he wanted back so badly that he erased me before I even began. I kissed their foreheads and whispered their names. Not the ones he'd picked. The names I'd chosen when I was alone, rubbing my belly in the middle of the night, wondering what kind of people they'd be. That room, cold and bright, held the kind of silence that burns. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just nodded and walked out with nothing but the gown on my back and a discharge paper that didn't even list me as mother. Later that night, I sat on the bus back to Queens. A woman across from me smiled and asked, "Boy or girl?" I lied and said I was visiting a friend, because saying I just gave birth to twins and now I'm nothing doesn't go over well in casual conversation. The hardest goodbye is to someone still breathing. But the real twist? It came 3 weeks later. My friend Mia sent me a photo. Said she saw Chase and the babies in Central Park. The woman beside him looked familiar, too familiar. It was Elise, his ex. The one who'd dumped him when his wife passed. The one who'd said she couldn't handle being a stepmom, let alone raising another woman's children. And there she was, pushing the stroller like the boys were hers. Smiling like she earned. Yet I stared at that photo for 10 full minutes, my coffee growing cold in my hands. I zoomed in. She was wearing a necklace I left at Chase's place years ago. The one he said he threw out. Something in me cracked open. I wasn't just erased. I was replaced, and not just by anyone, but by the one person who had already walked away from him before. Chase didn't want a future. He wanted to rewrite the past, and I wasn't part of that version. But the babies, those boys, they were. I told myself I'd move on. I tried, got a teaching job, found a small studio apartment, told everyone I was just focusing on me, but at night I'd close my eyes and still feel their weight on my chest. I'd hear their first cries in the back of my mind like a song on repeat, and I kept thinking, what if one day they look up and don't recognize the face calling herself Mom? What if I became a ghost in their story before I ever had the chance to be real? And that question would follow me for years, until the day our paths crossed again in the most unexpected way. 5 years is long enough to convince yourself something never happened. You build a new life. You wake up early, make coffee, smile at your neighbors, and pretend your heart isn't carrying a weight that never seems to lift. I became a third-grade teacher at a small public school in Brooklyn. The kids were loud and messy and honest, my kind of people. Every morning I'd write the date on the board, take attendance, and remind myself, today is a good day. It was working. At least I thought it was. Until the Monday that broke the whole thing open again. The principal popped her head into my room just before first bell and said, "You've got 2 new students today, twins, transferred from a private school in Manhattan." I smiled. "Send them in." The door opened, and I stopped breathing. 2 boys, the same age, same height, stepped inside. One had a tiny dimple when he smiled, just like the baby who used to rest against my chest. The other tilted his head the same way Chase used to when he was curious about something. They had his eyes, but it was more than that. It was the way they looked at me, like something in their little hearts paused for a second too. They said their names were Ethan and Caleb. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Welcome to room 208. That whole day was a blur. They sat in the front row, listened better than most, asked smart questions, helped clean up after recess. Sweet kids, sharp, polite. But I couldn't stop staring. And then during quiet reading time, Caleb dropped his pencil. I knelt to help him pick it up. Our eyes met, and I swear, in that 1 second, something passed between us. Like recognition. Like home. You never forget the eyes you gave birth to. That night I lay awake for hours. Could it really be them? There was no last name listed on their file. Just Morgan. I almost laughed when I saw it. Of course he wouldn't change it. Chase always wanted control. Always wanted to keep things looking clean on paper. I couldn't tell anyone. Couldn't ask questions. Couldn't risk my job. But every day they gave me little pieces of themselves. Ethan loved science and hated broccoli. Caleb liked to write his name in all caps and always made sure his shoelaces were tied tight. They both hummed. The same tune when they were thinking. A tune I used to hum to my belly before bed. At first I thought I was imagining it. That maybe my mind, still aching from old wounds, was painting stories where they didn't belong. But then they started drawing pictures of a lady with brown hair who smelled like cookies and always wore purple. I wore purple almost every Friday. And I always brought cookies on test days. One afternoon, Ethan stayed after class. He handed me a folded piece of paper and said, "You remind me of someone." I asked, "Who?" He just shrugged. "I don't know, but it feels nice." I took that paper home and unfolded it on my kitchen table. It was a drawing of me, brown. Hair, purple sweater, and 2 little stick figures hugging my legs. I cried until the sky turned black. Some bonds don't break. Some roots grow underground, quiet and strong, until they rise again when you least expect it. I had no proof, just a gut feeling, a deep ache, and the sound of their laughter echoing in my classroom like a song I never forgot. And even though I didn't know what to do yet, I knew I had to find out the truth, because something inside me whispered, if they are mine, then they've already come home. Every morning, they walked into my classroom with sleepy eyes and backpack straps sliding off their shoulders. They called me Miss Bennett, like every other student did. But when they smiled at me, those wide, unfiltered smiles that only kids can give, my soul heard something else. It heard Mom. At first, I told myself I was just being emotional, that grief has a way of rewriting the present, that sometimes when we miss someone badly enough, we start seeing them everywhere. But this wasn't just in my head. It was in how Caleb always tried to sit closest to my desk, how Ethan would wait until every other student left before handing me his homework, how both of them leaned into me during story time, like they trusted me without knowing why. They didn't remember me, but something in them still knew me. One afternoon, as the class was filing out, Ethan lingered. He tugged at my sleeve and said, "Miss Bennett, your voice makes me feel safe." Then he ran off before I could answer. I stood there frozen, the words echoing like church bells. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it over the ticking of the kitchen clock. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I stole 2 plastic cups from the school cafeteria, took their pencils after class, a strand of hair from Caleb's hoodie. It felt wrong, like a betrayal. But what if I was right? What if these weren't just students in my class? What if they were my children? I sent the samples to a lab in New Jersey under a fake name, paid cash. And then I waited. 10 days, 10 nights. Every second felt like a lifetime. When the envelope finally came, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely open it. The result? 99.999% match. I was their mother. Not a figure of speech, not a feeling. A scientific fact. The air left my lungs. I dropped the paper on the floor and just stared at it. For 5 years, I'd been carrying a wound that never healed. And now, here was the proof. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was chasing my sons. And I had found them. But as soon as that relief came, something colder followed. If I was their mother, who had been raising them? I started digging. Quietly. Carefully. Found their address in a school database. Midtown East. Luxury high-rise. Not surprising. But what I didn't expect. The name on the emergency contact form. Elise Carter, Chase's ex, the one from the park. The one who said she couldn't be a stepmom. The one who called me a temporary solution. I couldn't believe it. She had taken my place. Not just in Chase's life, but in theirs. She let them call her mom. Lied to their faces, built a life on a stolen truth. How do you even begin to fight that? How do you tell 2 boys that the woman tucking them in at night isn't who she says she is? And how do you face the man who looked you in the eye 5 years ago and said, "Your job is done," knowing he gave your children to someone else? I didn't know what to do yet. I didn't know what it would cost. But I knew this. I wasn't walking away again. Because now I had something stronger than a contract. I had proof. I had love that never left. And I had 2 boys who didn't need to remember my face, because their hearts already knew my name. I waited outside his office building for over an hour. My hands were cold, even though it was spring. The envelope in my purse felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. When Chase finally walked out, he didn't see me at first. Same tailored coat. Same careful walk like he was always 5 seconds ahead of everyone else. I stepped into his path. He stopped. Anna? He said it like a question, like a memory he didn't ask for. We need to talk. He looked around, then sighed. Now's not a good time. I held up the envelope. It's about Ethan and Caleb. He froze. His eyes didn't move, but I saw the shift in his body. Tension. Fear. He didn't ask what was inside. He knew. We sat on a bench just outside the park. The same park where Mia had seen him with Elise. The same park where my sons had once smiled for a photo I was never meant to see. I didn't come here to fight, I said. I came to tell you the truth. He stayed quiet. I placed the envelope in his lap. Read it. Chase opened it slowly like he already knew what it would say. His fingers paused halfway down the page. Then he folded it shut, and he cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just one tear that fell down his cheek before he could stop it. They're yours? He whispered. I nodded. They were always mine. He looked down. I thought you'd moved on. I tried. Then why now? Because they found me before you did. He didn't respond, just stared at the sidewalk like it held answers. I was scared, he finally said. When Elise left the first time, I thought I'd lost everything. And when you came back into my life with that offer, it felt like a second chance. But I couldn't let myself feel anything for you. I couldn't lose again. So you gave them to her? She came back, said she was ready, said she could love them if I let her pretend. And I was tired. I wanted normal. I swallowed hard. And what about what I wanted? You signed the papers, Anna. I signed a deal, not a life sentence. He looked at me then. Really looked. You made me feel things I couldn't control. That scared me more than losing Elise ever did. There it was. The truth. Not from a courtroom, not from a fight, but from the mouth of the man who once walked away like I was nothing more than a service. It took science to prove what my heart already knew, I said quietly. He nodded. I see them in you every day, he said. The way they laugh, the way they question everything. It's you. I just didn't want to admit it. So now what? I don't know. I want to see them. He hesitated. They already know something's off, I said. Kids feel these things. They don't need the whole story right now. But they need the truth eventually. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't want a scandal. I don't want this getting out. I almost laughed. So your name stays clean, but I keep bleeding quietly? He winced. I'm sorry, Anna. I never thought it would come back like this. Well, it did. I stood. You're their father, but I'm their mother. And whether you like it or not, that means something. He looked up. I don't want to fight you. Then don't. I turned to leave. As I walked away, I heard him whisper, What do I tell Elise? I didn't stop. That's your lie. To clean up, because the truth may hurt. But lies, they kill everything that still had a chance to live. It was a rainy Thursday when I got the call. The school secretary said Ethan and Caleb hadn't shown up for class, and no one had called in to excuse them. I tried to stay calm. Maybe they were sick. Maybe someone forgot to call. But something in my chest told me this was different. By the time I got home that night, my phone was ringing nonstop. Parents, the principal, and finally, Chase. They're gone, he said. His voice was panicked, tight. They left a note. My heart stopped. What did it say? He paused, then read it out loud. If she's not our mom, then we don't need a dad either. I sat down hard, like my legs forgot how to hold me. They ran away? I whispered. They're not here. Elise is beside herself. I didn't say anything, because a part of me wasn't surprised. Kids know more than we think. They feel more than we give them credit for. And when the people they trust lie, they don't rebel. They retreat. They didn't run away from home. They ran toward truth. They ran toward safety. They ran toward me. I checked my front steps. Nothing. My voicemail. Empty. But when I opened the door to my classroom early the next morning, there they were, sleeping bags under my desk. Ethan curled against the bookshelf, Caleb using a sweatshirt for a pillow. I didn't speak. I just dropped to my knees and pulled them both into my arms. They didn't cry. They didn't explain. They just held on like they'd been waiting years to do it. Later, over peanut butter, sandwiches in the teacher's lounge, they told me everything. They'd overheard Elise on the phone. She was talking to someone about keeping up appearances and not letting that woman ruin everything. They asked questions. She didn't answer, so they made a plan, packed their backpacks with snacks and a map of the city, took the train, walked the last 6 blocks in the rain. Why here? I asked. Ethan looked up. Because you feel like home. Caleb nodded. And because you smell like cookies. That got a laugh out of me. I didn't have the right words. I didn't have a plan. But I knew one thing. They didn't rebel. They returned. To the one place that felt safe. To the arms that once held them. When they were only minutes old. To the voice that still hummed lullabies when the world got too loud. They came back to me. I called Chase and told him they were safe. He wanted to send someone to pick them up. I said no. You need to come yourself, I told him, and not with Elise. He agreed. When he arrived, the boys didn't run, but they didn't reach for him either. Can we stay with her? Caleb asked. She's our mom, Ethan added. You said so. Chase looked at me, then at them, and he nodded. Yeah, he said softly. She is. It wasn't a grand reunion. No tears, no hugs, just quiet understanding. Sometimes the loudest truths come from silence. That night, they stayed with me. We made pancakes for dinner, watched an old movie, fell asleep on the couch in a pile of blankets. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending anymore. Because the boys didn't need a DNA test. They didn't need court orders or fancy titles. They just needed someone who made them feel like they belonged, and they found her. They found me. The boys stayed with me for a week. It was quiet, full of slow mornings, burnt toast, and puzzles we never finished. They called me Anna, but the way they looked at me said something deeper, like they knew the truth, even if the words still felt too big to say out loud. Chase came by every day. He helped with dinner, sat through math homework, and listened more than he talked. One night, after the boys had gone to bed, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, I want to fix this. I want to try again. I didn't answer. Right away. We weren't two strangers anymore. But we weren't a family either. Not yet. We played house once, I said. Now we need to figure out what a real home looks like. He nodded. I'm willing to do the work. It sounded good, almost too good. And that's when everything turned. It started with whispers. A parent at school saying she'd heard I'd been unstable, that I had episodes, that the boys weren't safe with me. Then someone emailed the school board a video. Grainy footage of me in a grocery store, arguing with a cashier who had shorted my change. It was edited to make me look angry, unhinged. The school opened an investigation. I was placed on leave. Then came the visit from Child Protective Services. They asked questions I wasn't ready for. Where were the boys sleeping? Had I ever yelled at them? Had I ever taken medication? I answered every question, handed over everything they asked for. But the fear? That stayed with me. I called Chase. He came over immediately, his face pale. Elise, he said. It has to be her. I didn't want to believe it. But I knew I had to. She can't let go, he said. She thinks if she takes you down, she gets them back. It didn't stop there. One night I got a knock at the door. A woman in uniform. She said there had been a report, a tip, that I was planning to flee the state with the boys, that I'd threatened someone. It wasn't true, but they searched my apartment anyway, woke up the boys, asked them questions with clipboards and cold voices. After they left, Ethan crawled into my bed. Caleb followed, eyes wide. "Did we do something wrong?" he whispered. "No, sweetheart," I said. "You did everything right." That's when I knew I couldn't stay silent. Elise wasn't just bitter, she was dangerous. Chase confronted her. She denied everything, until the twist none of us saw coming. She hired someone, a man pretending to be a rideshare driver. His job? To pick the boys up from school and drive them somewhere for a quick visit with their father. Only it wasn't Chase who sent the car. It was her. The school caught it just in time. The front desk called me, then the police. The man was arrested before he even made it out of the parking lot. She had planned everything, down to the text messages that made it look like I was trying to steal the boys. She tried to frame me, I told Chase. But the truth doesn't need to shout. It shows up in court records, in timestamps, in quiet teachers who remember every pickup and drop-off, and in two boys who never doubted where home really was. That week, Elise was arrested for attempted kidnapping and obstruction of justice. The school cleared my name. CPS closed the case. But more than that, the silence lifted. I didn't need to scream to be heard, because when something is true, it doesn't have to fight to exist. It just waits, steady, until all the lies burn themselves out. Losing my job was hard, but losing my name, that was harder. When the school suspended me, it didn't just take away my paycheck. It took away my place. The little room where kids wrote stories and spilled glue. The hallway smiles. The bulletin. Board covered in messy drawings. I walked past that school every morning, even though I had nowhere to go. I'd stand across the street, coffee in hand, and wonder if Ethan and Caleb could feel that I was still nearby. Chase tried to fix things. He called the school board. He spoke to the superintendent. But words like investigation and policy don't bend easily, especially when someone's been working so hard to make you look like the problem. For a moment, I thought about disappearing again, packing up, starting over, somewhere far away. But then I found the letter. It was sitting on my front step, inside a worn manila envelope. No return address. Inside were 2 pieces of notebook paper, folded once, then again. The first one was from Ethan. It said, "They said you're not our real mom, but you smell like love, and love smells like you." I read it 5 times before I even looked at the second page. It was from Caleb. It said, "You remember things no one else knows, like how I hate the tag on my shirt and how Ethan needs 2 pillows. You always listen. You don't pretend." I sat on the floor of my hallway and cried until my shirt was soaked through. No DNA can explain the smell of home. It doesn't come from biology. It comes from bedtime songs, from holding hands on hard days, from remembering the tiny details that make someone feel seen. It comes from showing up again and again, even when it's hard. A few days later, we stood in court. The boys had been assigned a lawyer. Elise was still out on bail. Chase sat beside me, nervous but quiet. The judge asked if the children wanted to say anything. Their lawyer stood up and handed the judge the same 2 letters. She read them aloud in a quiet courtroom where every word seemed to hang in the air, like it weighed 100 pounds. When she finished, you could have heard a pin drop. Then the judge looked at me. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "do you want to respond?" I shook my head. I didn't need to. They had already said everything. That day, the judge granted shared legal custody to Chase and me. Full physical custody was awarded to me, with Chase having scheduled visits. Elise's rights were officially terminated. Afterward, someone from the back asked me, "How did you do it? How did you stay calm?" I smiled. "If you want to hurt." Me, I said, go through my kids first, because they are my armor, my heartbeat, my whole reason, and I would walk through fire if it meant keeping them safe. They chose me. When they had every reason to doubt, they spoke for me. When I wasn't allowed to speak, they believed me. When others tried to paint me as a villain. And that's stronger than any lie. Because love like that doesn't need a headline. It just needs a home. The courtroom was quiet, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, not even from nerves. It was something else, something deeper. The kind of trembling that comes when you're standing on the edge of something you never thought you'd do. See again? Justice. The judge read through the final papers slowly, carefully, like each word carried weight. I looked over at Ethan and Caleb. They were sitting still, their feet swinging just above the floor. They weren't scared. They weren't unsure. They were ready, just like me. Chase sat on the other side, and for once, he didn't look like a man trying to fix things. He just looked like someone trying to listen. The judge said my name. Then she said the words, "I'll never forget." The court recognizes Anna Bennett as the legal and custodial mother of Ethan and Caleb Morgan. Visitation rights will be granted to Mr. Chase Morgan under joint custody terms. That was it. No shouting, no applause, just quiet. The kind of quiet that means something real just happened. Sometimes the softest voice has the loudest truth, and mine had finally been heard. Chase stood. I thought he was going to shake my hand, or maybe just say thank you. But instead, he walked over, got down on one knee, and pulled out a small box. The courtroom didn't breathe. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he said. "But the biggest one was thinking you could be part of my story without being part of my life. I want us to raise them together, not as a team, but as a family." I didn't know what to say. The moment wasn't loud or perfect. It wasn't wrapped in fireworks or fancy words, but it was honest. And sometimes that's more than enough. I didn't say yes. Not right away. I just took his hand and helped him up. Later, outside the courtroom, reporters asked questions. Some tried to spin it into a headline. A few tried to turn it into drama. But the real story? It wasn't about a courtroom win. It wasn't about a marriage proposal. It was about a woman who had once been invisible, now standing tall because two little boys reminded her of who she really was. I wasn't loud. I wasn't rich. But I showed up every day. And in the end, that was louder than any lie Elise could have shouted. There's something powerful about quiet strength, about choosing to heal instead of hate, about standing up for love, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That day, I walked, out holding two hands that had once been pulled from mine. And I knew something for sure. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And when it does, the whole world leans in to listen. I never thought I'd wear a white dress again. Not after everything. Not after losing my name, my babies, my voice. But here I was, standing barefoot in our small backyard, the grass cool beneath my toes, the boys running circles around the chairs. We borrowed from the community center. There weren't hundreds of people. No string quartet. No big speech. Just Chase, me, and the two boys who made us something we could never be on our own. A family. I didn't say yes to the proposal because I missed who we were. I said yes because I saw who we'd become. Chase wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But somewhere between heartbreak and healing, we had both changed. And those boys, Ethan and Caleb, they needed something steady, something honest. Something that felt like home every day, not just when things were easy. I didn't marry Chase to relive the past. I married him because the future finally felt like ours. After the ceremony, the boys tackled me with hugs so tight I couldn't breathe. They shouted, "We're a real family now!" As if the papers in court hadn't already said it. But maybe they were right. Because being a family isn't about documents or last names. It's about bedtime stories, shared pancakes, showing up even when you're tired or scared or unsure. It's about sitting through math homework and wiping away tears after hard days. It's about standing in a courtroom and being brave, and about whispering, "I love you," even when you're not sure what happens next. I used to think I was just the woman who carried them, a rental body, a placeholder, a chapter meant to be skipped. But now, I see it clearer than ever. I didn't just give birth to them. They gave life back to me. They reminded me what it means to fight for something real, to believe in what you can't always explain, to speak up even when your voice shakes. And most of all, they reminded me that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means forgiving. And choosing to write a new story, even when the old one nearly broke you, to anyone who's ever felt erased, like your role didn't matter, your pain didn't count, or your story didn't deserve an ending, please hear this. You are not alone. Some pages don't need to be torn out. They just need to be rewritten. Because sometimes, what you thought was the end is actually the beginning. And if life ever brings something back that you thought you'd lost forever, what would you do? Would you hide? Would you run? Or would you reach out gently and say, "I remember you. I never stopped"?